Art on Demand is a production of the Cultural Arts Alliance of Walton County, brought to you with support from Alys Beach and 30A.com. While these events are provided at no cost to you, we do ask that you donate what you can by visiting our website, culturalartsalliance.com, in order to help the CAA continue to foster creativity, employ artists, and bring you entertainment, education, and engagement through Art on Demand. We hope you love this virtual event.
I'm Megan. I'm a functional ceramicist, and I teach ceramics for the Cultural Arts Alliance. In the next 30 minutes, I'm going to show you how to demo a colander. Thanks to Alys Beach and the 30A company for their support in this project. So I've got a block of clay that is compressed, free of air bubbles, that I'm going to work from. You can use fishing line or a wire tool that you have at home to cut your block. And I have a piece cut here. And then you're going to use a rolling pin to roll it out. I like to work a lot thinner with my pieces. I get it to about ½ an inch to ¼ of an inch thick. And then I always have a template. I'm going to use a paper plate today to cut out a circle that I'm going to use for the base. I'm using a needle tool to cut, which you can get online. And here's our base. So I'm going to be doing the coil method, which is rolling out coil from the clay like this. You want them to be about as wide as your finger or your thumb. And I start by cutting blocks off of my large block of clay. I compress it, and I use my fingers to roll it out. I start from the middle and roll all the way out to the sides. You want to make sure that you're keeping the coil really even all the way. That's going to give you an even wall thickness. So I've got a few coils here that I'm going to work with. So I'm going to be using a lot of things that you can find at home to make my colander today, starting with a fork. And what I'm going to do with the fork is score around the edge of the base, probably about ½ an inch. And I want to make sure it's scored pretty well. And I'm going to do the same with one side of the coil. Scoring both of these sides is going to help it attach. I'm also going to use a spray bottle, and I just want to add a little bit of water to help it stick. I'm going to apply this coil right to the edge and compress it down, making sure the coil and the base get attached. And I'll just keep building up. The beginning process of building can be pretty messy because we're going to clean it up as we go along. So your scoring and your coils don't have to be perfect. And again, I'm just adding water to one side. And I'm going to add this coil directly on top of the other one. Making sure I'm compressing the coils into each other. Now, as I'm building up, I'm going to work my way out just a little bit to get that round colander shape. I'll usually add about 3 or 4 coils before I combine them. So I've added a few coils, and now I'm going to use my thumb to combine them up at an angle. You want to make sure you really blend the coils together. So as you're blending your coils, you want to make sure that you're putting counter pressure with your other hand, whether on the outside or on the inside, so you're not misshaping your form. So as I keep building, I have a turntable that I'm going to use to make it a little bit easier to add these coils. And I always put newspaper down on it so that my piece doesn't stick to it. If you have a Lazy Susan or a turntable at home, that's something that you can use too. So I've built my form to the desired height that I'd like. And what I am working on now is blending all of the coils so that it's one piece and so that they don't crack apart. I like to use a couple of tools. They're called ribs to help me smooth it out a little bit. It's really just helping blend those coils one more time, and it kind of thins out the walls so that my piece is not as heavy. And I'm keeping counter pressure with my opposite hand the whole time. I'm going to do the same thing to the inside. And I'm pulling this rib at an angle, making sure all of my coils are blended. I don't want it to be too thick because it'll be too heavy to use. But if I make it too thin, it could warp or easily break in the firing. It's always easier to work a little bit thicker and take away. So I'm just going to use this rib to continue to shape this piece just a little bit more that I've just built, and just take a little bit more clay off. And once I get it to the right shape and the right thickness that I want, It'll set up, usually overnight. I'll cover it in a plastic bag and just let it harden a little bit, and it'll get to about leather hard, which means I won't be able to bend it like this. This is a little too soft to continue working with to create the holes in the handles for the colander. So I have one that has set up overnight. I wrapped it in a plastic bag. So this is leather hard. It's still soft and wet, but I can't bend it easily. And this is going to be easy to work with to create the holes for my colander. So this, I'm just going to shape this top, get it how I'd like. So once I get it to the desired thickness and the shape that I want, in the leather hard stage, I'm going to flip it over and I'm going to add a coil to the bottom to make a foot. So if I set it up and I want water to drain, that foot will allow for that. So I'm going to cut and roll another coil for my foot. This one doesn't need to be too thick. And I'm going to slip and score it again. I'm also going to score my coil. Gonna make sure it's really compressed down. And then I'm going to carefully blend this one with the piece. When you flip it back over, you've got a foot for it to sit on. So now we're ready to add handles and start making our holes for the colander. So I'm going to use this needle tool again, and I just like to freehand the handles but you can always use a template with a piece of paper. Just kind of mark off a section and draw it out. I'll draw it on there first and then I'll slowly cut it out. If you don't have a needle tool, you can also use a kitchen knife for this part too. So I have one handle, and I usually use what I cut out on the first one as a template to do my second handle. So I place it on the other side directly across, and I trace it out. Now we have our handles, and I'll refine them a little bit, and I'll probably cut them out a little more. You always want to test it with your hands and make sure that your hands are going to fit in it. Mine are a little snug right now, and it is going to shrink a little bit. As the clay dries, it's going to shrink. So I want to make them a little wider. So before I add my holes for the colander, for all of the water to drain, I'm going to use a rib just to refine it any more that I want to before I have all the little holes in the way. So I always like to test the piece with how heavy it is. This one's still pretty heavy, so I'd probably use that rib and shave it down a little bit more because it's just a little heavy for my preference. But for the sake of time, I'm gonna go ahead and skip to making the holes for the colander. So these little hole cutters you can easily get online, and this is what I'm gonna use to start. So I always start in the middle with that first one, and I kind of work my way out. You want to rotate it as it's going in so it doesn't crack. Sometimes I like to add a lot of holes and get really funky with the designs. Sometimes I like to be really simple with them. If you want to cut out a template that you lay in there to make your holes, you can do that, but I kind of just go for it. I rotate it. I guess I find inspiration, actually I first made a colander maybe 4 or 5 years ago after an internship that had a lot of impact on me, and it kind of changed the way I think about food and how I ate, and I ended up coming back home after that internship and cooking a lot more. So that's kind of where the ceramic colander played a big part in my life. That was like one of my first functional ceramic pieces that I made that I actually used in the kitchen. And I don't always just use it to like drain pasta or wash my veggies off, but sometimes it's just like a nice piece to sit on my counter that holds my fruits or veggies. So that's kind of, that's where my inspiration came from for starting a colander. Oftentimes people they come to class and they say, I need this in my home, I want to make this. So a lot of times people will make things from wanting something. Personal preference too on whether you want to extend the holes on the side. That is, kind of up to you. I never go halfway above that halfway mark. Sometimes I'll just do a row or two at the bottom. And if you have like a large sponge or an old towel at home, it's kind of nice to set your piece on that as you're working when it's in this leather hard stage, so it'll keep its shape rather than just laying it on the table. That's why I'm holding mine in the air, because I want to keep the form of my colander. So all of my clay scraps that I've used throughout this whole time, I have just saved in a little bucket or bowl. And what I'm gonna do is spray it with water, and it'll soak all that water up and it'll be soft again, and I'll be able to reconstitute that by wedging it back in, and I'll be able to work more with it. So I've refined this piece a little bit more. I thinned it down with my rib, and I finished cutting out all of the holes for my colander, so now it can drain. You want to be very careful with your clay at this stage. As it dries, it gets very fragile. So I'm going to be very gentle with it. But what I am going to do is go back to my needle tool, and I'm just going to refine these holes a little bit more. Just get off any clay that's in there. And once I'm finished with that, I'm going to let this piece dry out completely. It's going to turn a light kind of beige gray color as it dries out. That's how I'll know it's drying. When it's dark like this, that means it still has moisture in the clay. But I'm probably going to cover it with some plastic, maybe a trash bag or a plastic grocery bag, so that it dries slowly. If it dries too fast, sometimes it tends to crack. So for it to dry, it usually takes a few days. It depends on the weather, the humidity levels. If it's drier, it's going to dry out quicker. But if it's humid, it's going to take longer to dry. So if it's in an air-conditioned room, it's going to dry out a little bit quicker. And once it's completely dry, we'll put it in the kiln, and we bisque fire to cone 04, which is basically just a temperature reading. So that goes to just about 2,000 degrees, a little less than 2,000 degrees. So that first firing, the bisque firing, is what's going to give it kind of that first cooking. And then it'll be ready to glaze. And then we'll glaze fire it, that second firing, and that's where it gets its color. That's that finished product. And I have one right here. So this is a finished colander after it's been bisqued and glazed. So we do offer hand building and wheel throwing classes at the Cultural Arts Alliance. If you're interested in making something like this or something a little different, go to the website and sign up. We have a fully functioning ceramics studio with a kiln where we can fire the pieces that you make in class.
Thank you for experiencing this episode of Art on Demand, presented by the Cultural Arts Alliance of Walton County, with support from Alys Beach and 30A.com. We hope you explored your creativity and learned something new today. As the creative core of Walton County, the CAA offers support, connection, and access opportunities for all forms of art, every variety of maker, all levels of learners, and especially art lovers. Through performance, funding, and educational programs, the 501c3 organization directly connects the people of Walton County with the broader view, the critical exploration, and the answers only the arts have the power to provide. If you loved this episode, please visit culturalartsalliance.com and click the donate button to give what you can to help the CAA continue to bring you art on demand. And stay tuned for our next virtual event coming soon.